into the next episode of View from Luffield with new included added visual delightfulness. Just wanted a few shout outs if possible. Obviously, the week just gone marked the anniversary of both Senna and Ratzenberger's death. I'm sure if you were watching F1 back then, you remember where you were. We were sat in the front room with Dad watching it when it happened.
I was 6, I don't remember, to be fair.
No, well, we were. I'll tell you
fair,
that much.
fair, okay.
And also, Jochen Mass passed away yesterday, which is a shame. 78 years old, another champion gone, unfortunately. And the problem is, if the same people keep winning championships, there's going to be very few left alive.
I don't know, yeah.
But yeah, on to everything Miami. Anything you want to start with?
Yeah, so we've got a lot to go through today because obviously it was a sprint weekend. So a bit of news first as well, or second bit of thing to pass on. Congratulations to Max Verstappen. I know we can be quite critical of him and will be this episode of Max Verstappen, but no, congratulations to him and Kelly Piquet on the birth of their baby girl Lily. And also Miami has been extended as a Formula One circuit until 2041.
Oh, yes.
Although that being said, this Miami wasn't actually as bad as previous Miamis, but we'll get into it all. So, fair bit to go through. Obviously, like I said, there was a sprint weekend. Firstly, sprint quali.
Sprint quali.
Pick up on. It was actually an exciting session. Probably more exciting than the race.
Yeah. Antonelli, youngest ever pole sitter. I'll put pole sitter in the inverted.
Yeah,
because it's not a race pole, it's a sprint race pole.
What?
We all know that sprint races mean nothing. I've been saying this all season.
Yeah. Anybody want to go back and watch the Bahrain episode
No.
where he was waxing lyrical about Lewis's winning the China sprint?
No, it meant nothing.
It doesn't count anymore.
It means nothing anymore.
Weird that, isn't it? Antonelli was absolutely phenomenal.
What a lap.
It was a fantastic lap. And to be fair, for someone of his age as well. And we'd spoken about how he's been unfortunate, how Russell's sort of been Mr. Consistent in Mercedes, and Antonelli's been the one who's been, I wouldn't say more chaotic, but he's been sort of making more headlines, but then it's just not gone his way when it's come to the race.
Yeah.
And it, unfortunately for him, didn't again when it came to the sprint race. The one interesting thing as well, actually, that happened in sprint qualifying was Verstappen preventing his own teammate from getting a lap in. Or did he, should I say? It looked like he maybe did.
I don't think it was intentional. I don't know if Verstappen's lifted to let Tsunoda through and Tsunoda's backed off to sit behind him, because Max soon bolted to the pits when he realised that Tsunoda was sat behind him. But he just says, it's that what used to be super slick Red Bull. Everything was, even the pit stops were super quick. They were the team to beat on everything, and now they just those little. You can see cracks appearing.
Yeah, you could,
and again points out to my notes are sat next to me for anyone watching. Red Bull's Perez paradox continues, doesn't it?
Well, we touched on it in the mid-season review episode. Check it out on YouTube and Spotify if you haven't already. We touched on it on that. Is that car just built so much for Max that nobody else could do anything in it?
Well, if it is, they've built a bad car for Max.
Well, they have. I mean, he's still in there or thereabouts, but I mean, you heard. We'll touch on it when we go into the race, but you heard him in the race. He's not happy with that car.
But he's been saying it all season, hasn't he?
The
brakes, it won't turn. The tyres, it's sliding. I know Max is known for having a bit of a moan. If something's not right on the car. I know, yeah, shocked emoji. But everything he's saying is what used to be the sticking point, the strong point for Red Bull. And
yeah.
If they've built a car for Max, they've got it wrong.
Yeah, and what's worse is they've got it wrong for the other, Lawson or Tsunoda, whoever they might took in it.
What I will say though is I think Perez would do a better job than everyone who's been in that second seat so far this year.
In 2025, yes.
Yeah.
But if you with Tsunoda and Lawson, or whichever one obviously it was Tsunoda, but whoever you're going to go for, you're going long-term game. So Perez isn't a long-term driver, is he?
No, but the constructors and the money from the constructors comes after each season.
Yeah, it does.
And I know Perez let him down last year with that. And
Where do you reckon they'll finish in the constructors?
Above Ferrari.
Third.
I don't know.
I think
it could be 7th and 8th in the way they're going, but
on Mercedes performance, I think they could finish second.
I think Mercedes are shooing for second at the moment.
Yeah, I do. Okay, so how we started then the sprint. Antonelli was quickest, Piastri second, Norris third. We had Verstappen in fourth, Russell fifth, Leclerc and Hamilton sixth and seventh, which wasn't terrible for Ferrari, but that's probably about where the positives are. Oh no, sorry, no, it's a sprint race. Albon in eighth, Hadjar in ninth, and Alonso was in 10th.
Yeah.
Got himself to SQ3. And that's the first time, because we took, again, if you watch one of the previous episodes, if you watch the Saudi one, we had Stroll was out in Q1 in every qualifying session, not necessarily a sprint, and Alonso always got through to Q2, but never quite made it to Q3. If you include sprint qualifying as qualifying, then I don't, because I'm not a big fan of the sprint format. I think they should, quickly on the sprint format, when it was first introduced to F1, you had qualifying, you had the sprint, and then
that was the
result of the sprint, exactly, was where you started the Grand Prix. Now that they've done this whole sprint qualifying race, it basically makes the sprint completely redundant.
Barring the 8 points you get for a win.
Yeah, eight for a win. So it's 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But I thought it added a bit more jeopardy if the sprint actually, this early stage in the season, to have already had two of the sprints, it just seems a little bit. I don't think drivers are going to take the risks that you might do if you know that that's going to be. Say you looking at Hamilton as an example, qualified 7th in sprint qualifying.
Yeah.
If he knew he had to finish 4th, 5th, 3rd, whatever it is in the sprint to then start the Grand Prix from there, I think he's more prepared to take a risk. Whereas if you're in that sort of lower echelons of the sprint qualifying, you're probably just going to, all right, I know he didn't, and we'll go into sprint in a sec, but I don't know, I feel like it added more jeopardy when the sprint actually meant something for qualifying.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose the other your side argument is as well, how much are the teams willing to risk for 8 points?
That's exactly what I'm getting at,
with all these cost caps and everything. It just feels like a moot point. They get a medal or something, don't they? That's nice.
Yeah, and this is even coming from a McLaren fan who we now are I will give the results of the race. Well, you've already seen it. We're now the first team in Formula 1 history to get a 1-2 at both the sprint and the actual Grand Prix from a weekend. Is that a thing? I don't know. Yay. But yeah, I don't know. I just felt like sprints were a thingy. And if you add on top the strain that Martin Brundle touched on it before the race. No, he didn't. Ted Kravitz did. The strain that sprint qualifying, then the conditions that we even had for the sprint race. Then straight after the sprint race, they've got to do qualifying with still unsure of the weather. I don't know. I don't know if it's just adding too much.
It was all up in the air, like really up in the air at one point, wasn't it? And we're kind of moving on to the race now, aren't we? Because sprint quali was sprint quali. It was good, but nothing.
It was good, but it was what it was. Okay, so moving on to the sprint.
Yeah, sorry, it was just moving on to a point. At one point with the weather conditions being so poor, Martin and David were even that sounds weird. Crofty were even talking about the fact that when do they cancel it? Because the cars have to prep for quali. And
that again goes back to the point I was just making. At what point do you say this actually? And that's why F1 won't, because they can't. If they'd have cancelled that sprint on Saturday, then that's them admitting that this is nonsense.
Yeah. I mean,
it's not got the excitement that it ever had in GP2. For those of you who ever used to watch it back in the F1 and GP2 days, it's not got the level of excitement that it had when it was GP2 sprint.
No, F2, but yeah, I get your point.
Sorry, but
yeah. No, it's I get that they want to get more cars on track. And whilst we're on the sprint race, that didn't quite work because they only started with 19.
For those who haven't seen it, Leclerc been in it. Now this is not. No, I'm going to contextualise that. For those of you who've watched before, you would know that I will take any chance to have a swipe at Ferrari. However, on this occasion, I'm not going to, because I'm going to take a swipe at Ferrari. I'm not going to take a swipe at the driver. Leclerc was completely a passenger on that. Not his fault whatsoever. You can hear how much he lifts off. That's normally a flat out corner. You can hear how much.
A corner, is
well,
it?
It's not. No, in the dry, it's not a corner. You can hear how much he lifts off. You can hear how much he's trying to just not apply any power whatsoever, and he just like completely aquaplanes into the wall. One thing I will say, and we've just touched on this, and I can't remember who said it in the commentary. Might have been Martin Brundle, but it was why not? This is the lap to the grid. This isn't the formation lap. The tyres that they put on the car are completely. It doesn't matter at all because they're not going to necessarily apply them from the race. They will tend to put on some used tyres from like a session that they've not had to send back to Pirelli. Everybody put full wets on for that lap, except Ferrari. And Hamilton even came over the radio and said, "Why have you put us on inters for this?" Leclerc obviously had the incident into the wall. I don't understand what Ferrari were trying to achieve, unless they just, and I know Crofty said in commentary, when they sent the Ferraris out, the Inters were probably right. But they've got all the weather technology to tell them what's coming. I don't understand why. If you burn those full wets out on that lap to the grid, it doesn't matter. I don't understand. I just don't understand the take the risk. I don't see why.
Unless they thought they were going to need them for the sprint. And the weather yesterday for the race wasn't.
Yeah, because they would have been brand news, wouldn't they? Because
they
wouldn't have used any wets until that point.
But yeah, it was just a silly error. But I mean, if you watch the rest of this, you'll hear me.
It's not the last time Ferrari make a silly error. So that unfortunate for Leclerc, but like Phil said, we started the sprint with 19. Straight from the start, we had a little bit of an incident.
Once we started,
after they didn't. Again, that was another thing actually that I have to hold F1 accountable for this weekend. The level of communication to the media that are therefore then communicating it onto the fans was appalling because nobody seemed to know if that was one lap under the formation lap, if under the safety car, if it was a race lap, if it was just an extra formation lap. It turned out to be an extra formation lap, and then we did a lap under the safety car, and we started, and we weren't sure whether we started the race having done 2 or done 3, and you've got to remember, like Martin Brundle said, these cars are fueled up for 19 laps.
Yeah, they won't run any extra fuel.
Yeah, so if you can't just say, we're going to do 4 formation laps, because then that's the cars needing fuel for 23, or and they don't have it, 20, 22, 23, whatever it be, and they don't have it.
No. Yeah, I always assume that if you start in the formation lap on the safety car, as soon as they cross the line again, they've started the race under the safety car.
Yeah, exactly. That's what. But even Ted Kravitz said that he thought it was just an extra formation lap. It turned out to be it was a farce. And all that. I have this same argument about football. When they take forever with the VAR and the fans in the ground don't know what's going on, it's the same thing with Formula One yesterday. None of the people in the crowd, necessarily knew. Had the race started? Had it not? I think that's poor.
I mean, it's difficult anyway when you're at the circuit, as you know, we're lucky enough to know as to what's going on. So the fact that people at home watching it were a little bit, we were baffled. Communication was absolutely appalling, and the amount of drivers saying that the visibility was the worst they've ever seen was quite surprising as well, because we have had way worse weather conditions than that.
I think the difficulty with it though is because they were saying that the track wasn't actually absorbing any of the rain.
Right.
Because of the way the Miami track was built, and people know this better than me, I only listened to a bit of it in the commentary. So it's like tighter, not woven, but there's no real place for the water to actually go into the surface. So when it was landing, it was just. So you normally have the tyres will clear an amount of the water, but also the ground will obviously absorb a certain amount of it. What was going on at Miami is just any rain that was hitting was just not going through anywhere, and I think that was more the point. I think what we saw. You're right. I agree. I think what we saw wasn't necessarily the worst, but I think like Piastri said on turn 17, it was effectively a river. Now I don't remember us seeing turn 17 from the back. From the car behind.
Yeah.
So I think it might not necessarily have been over the whole track was the worst we've ever seen. I agree. I mean, you go back to Belgium 98, for instance, where the spray was so bad Schumacher couldn't even see Coulthard.
Yeah.
So, and drove into the back of him. So I don't know that it was the worst, but I think in certain points it might have been.
Yeah.
Maybe. So I'm spitballing an idea.
These cars appear to be way worse in the rain. But we're almost getting to a point now where we don't go racing if it's wet.
And that's and Martin Brundle said in the 80s and 90s we would have started the race, and that's not necessarily to say it's right.
No.
Got to take safety into account, but yeah, I think you're right. I think they're so quick now that if the conditions aren't ideal, we can't have a race.
Yeah.
Anyway, so when we did start,
Yep.
we had the incident between Antonelli and Piastri at the start.
Piastri pushed him off. I don't know, I have to cling on to something.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
But what I will say, and we said this about at the start of Saudi between Gasly and Tsunoda, that Gasly didn't necessarily have to dip out, but because he knew it was Tsunoda and the type of driver that Tsunoda is, should he have? I think Antonelli, again, the same argument could be because he knows Piastri's fighting for the championship and he doesn't give up on stuff like that, and there's no way he'll be as cool in that situation as Piastri.
Yeah.
Should he? And I think he showed a little bit of inexperience, that all the pressure and all the excitement of starting on pole, could he have just maybe gone, do you know what, live to fight another day, dropped to second or third rather than the drop that he did take?
Well, like Martin always says, you don't win a race on the first turn, do you?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's hot-headedness, it's youth, it's probably knowing you were quick enough to do it.
Yeah.
You know, he was fast all weekend, and yeah, probably a lesson learned there rather than anything. And just to clear up, I don't believe Piastri did anything wrong. It was a tongue-in-cheek comment.
Speaking of doing something wrong,
yes,
Max Verstappen decided to start about 6 miles away from his grid.
he started second, didn't he?
Yeah, but there's no punishment because, and we'll go on to this when we go into the race as well. Because there was 2 incidents this weekend where we've had a little bit in my passionate McLaren rage last night. I was against Max Verstappen on it. I suppose the argument that hindsight, a good night's sleep, and
a decent result at the end.
And a decent result at the end
Yeah.
have brought. It's funny how that works, isn't it?
Yeah,
Funny
I
how
think
that
they should have all been penalised up until 7th and 8th.
But the one thing I will say, I don't understand. I don't understand how, if the FIA continue to let him get away with things, he will continue to do them, and that's what really frustrates me. And I nearly said something other than frustrates me then.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I was waiting for the beat machine. I didn't know if we had one or not.
It does, because you saw Norris got punished for it in Bahrain. Verstappen doesn't get punished for it in Miami. I'd love to see a side by side.
We're still talking about the
measurements.
sprint start.
The sprint start position. Yeah.
And to use visibility was poor as an excuse. From the FIA, not from.
Yeah, no. Like I say, it's not a Max rant.
No, he got it wrong, and if he'd been penalised, I'm sure he'd have probably gone, yeah, I kind of deserve that.
The thing is, if the stewards are going to let him off because the visibility is poor and that has restricted his braking zone, and that will make it difficult, I accept that. But if that's what they're going to do, a communication has got to be sent to all 20 drivers.
So I'm saying you can have an extra 2 foot.
Yeah, and to be fair, saying you can start in Imola if you want.
Yeah. Well, Ferrari still come last.
But I don't know, it just seemed a bit weird that Verstappen's the one who does it and they go, oh no, it's fine, we were going to let everyone have an extra couple of yards, a couple of centimetres or whatever anyway. It's like, what? Anyway. But again, it's another thing like you said, because it's a wet race, we're making all these different alterations.
It doesn't make sense. Again, Verstappen made a mistake. I'm sure if you asked him, he'd say, oh yeah, I fluffed it. I pulled up at the wrong point. Oops.
Yeah.
But if visibility was that poor, when they all pulled into the pit lane when the race start was aborted, they'd have all run up the back of each other.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't stop in time.
Yeah. Quite. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just...
Yeah, it's weird. When the race was actually racing, we everyone managed to stop in time then, didn't they, in the wet. And have always done. Speaking of Verstappen, this one, wasn't a Max Verstappen mistake.
No.
It was a error that he was involved in. The unsafe release on Antonelli.
Yeah, Red Bull have got some real pit stop gremlins, haven't they, this year?
Yeah,
it's not the first time we've called that out.
No, it's not. You had the mechanic. I mean, this wasn't a mechanical issue. This was everybody saying he was good to go, and the old lollipop man, as it were, should probably have been the man who said, "No, you can't go."
Yeah, they've got an override, which means someone on the pit wall sits there with a button and says, it was. I'm skipping forward, but it's proven in the race with Antonelli's pit stop.
Yeah.
He got held.
Going past. Yeah.
Sorry, that wasn't going to get mentioned in the race, but it's quite valid to this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they just released him straight into Antonelli, which completely fluffed up both the races, to be fair.
And this, yeah, but Verstappen's race deserves to be fluffed up because of that. Because
Yeah.
it's not his fault, but they're all
No,
a
but you're a team.
in it together, exactly. So the Verstappen and his team made a mistake. Therefore, he deserves the punishment that he got. Now, we've spoke about this on this channel before. The one thing that really upsets me a little bit is that it's such a shame because Antonelli's race is completely ruined at that point.
Yeah, he had to go straight on, didn't he?
So his race is completely ruined, and the punishment for Max doesn't help Antonelli in any way, shape, or form. And that's There's not. Again, I've said this before. I don't agree that the punishments necessarily fit the crime because that is a punishment for Verstappen, but it does absolutely nothing for Antonelli. What you can do, I have no idea.
No, I don't think there's a fix to this.
There isn't. But it always just feels like, yeah, that Verstappen got punished and Verstappen got his 10-second penalty. But, you know, I mean, if you look, Antonelli actually finished the sprint in, I can't see his name, 10th, which is
out of the points.
Which is out of the points for a sprint. So when you consider he started first, we had the incident with Piastri on the first lap, which you could argue he maybe could have, I'm not going to say should have, but maybe could have done differently. But the whole Verstappen thing is completely out of his control. And for him to start first, finish 10th and out the points, it's such a shame.
It is. And like you say, though, it's not Verstappen's fault either, which is, again, one of the... We'll wax on about this for years, but other sprint race bits.
Do you know there was a lot of... So the next note was Sainz driving the car unsafely. There was a lot of that this weekend. People driving the car in an unfit condition. And I don't understand why everybody... Yeah, you had Sainz do it.
Leclerc got reprimanded for it after he hit the wall.
You had... was it Doohan? Who was it who had a puncture? It was Doohan.
It was Doohan.
Who continued to drive that with the wheel hanging off the rim.
Yeah.
I don't understand why... You know, in work, where I work, if you make a mistake, then you end up with toolbox talks coming out your ass.
Oh, well, yeah.
For the next 6 weeks to make sure that same sort of situation doesn't happen again. I don't understand. Of the FIA, again, this is not a criticism of F1 because I've done a few today and will continue to. Have they just dropped the ball with not reminding drivers that? Because if it's one driver, you say you're an idiot.
Yeah.
The fact that it was 3-4 drivers.
I've got a counter argument to this.
Go on.
What's wrong with it?
It's the whole dropping debris on the track.
Yeah, so that's what's wrong. It's dropping debris. Drivers can't see the debris because they're driving around a car park of a stadium, not on a racetrack.
Yeah.
The fault's on the circuit again that luckily we've got for another 16 years.
I was going to say, you might not get this from the subtle hints we've dropped before, but me and Phil both aren't fans of Miami.
No, I mean, the setup's incredible. And the fact that all the little VIP or... where they go to eat is in the stadium. Looks amazing. But the racetrack is not, it's like Saudi, it's not fit for purpose. No. Hence why we see more virtual safety cars than, say, somewhere like Spa, which is a way more dangerous circuit.
Yeah.
But what's wrong with the driver trying to recover to the pits and carry his race on?
Yeah.
But then again...
I suppose it's a different argument because whether there's anything wrong with it or not, it's a rule. So don't break it.
No, fair point, but it's not as if Sainz was driving his car in an unsafe condition, but trying to outbrake someone into the hairpin, was he? He was staying out of the way. He was. They weren't racing.
He wasn't trying to set a fastest lap.
No. So they were driving it. It was in an unsafe condition, but they weren't driving it unsafely.
Yeah. Fair.
Sorry, but there we could.
It's an argument for another time. I think our next episode might be a Formula One Room 101.
Well, what would we... Yes, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, so next episode, we've just decided this now. Next episode, because there's no race next weekend, next episode will be a Formula One Room 101.
What does it bring? 3 items you want to bin from F1?
No, I think
McLaren.
Max. No, I think we just continue to just rant. Next week's going to be a rant. Yeah. Next week's going to be a complete and utter rant. We might even set this up where one of us is lay on the sofa like at a therapy session. Have your rants and then we'll swap halfway through and the other one can... We'll have answers in the comments if you want to do it any differently. Going back to the sprint though, what I did like is Norris asking for the safety car after everyone else had pitted.
Oh,
so because
yeah.
he was so close obviously to Piastri. Piastri got the choice of pit stop. Piastri pitted first, and I did like the fact that lap between Piastri pitting and Norris pitting. Now Norris was on the radio a couple of times, and he was like, "Oh, I think there's so much debris. I think we need to." In the end, he got it. And I must admit, under the rules, it did deserve a safety car. There was a lot of debris, but I just found it really funny that Norris was the one going, definitely needs a safety car, this. We need
So
one
Norris got a safety car and won a race
in Miami.
in a car park round a stadium.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah. I think there's something going on between Lando Norris and
Miami.
And safety cars.
Yeah.
Which is why I picked him as my choice to win.
You'd pick the safety car driver.
Yeah, to be fair. Who did actually win the sprint. So quickly rounding it off, because it did end under the safety car, which was a little bit of a shame.
Hamilton did well.
Lewis did well. I thought the timing of the safety car, actually, the two drivers it massively helped was obviously Lando, who won, and Lewis, who came third.
Yep.
That's not necessarily to say that they wouldn't have done that without, although they wouldn't have done that without. But no, fair play to them both. I thought it was, we kind of knew it was coming. Fernando Alonso won't be happy with Liam Lawson.
No.
Comes off the track and just completely plows into him.
Yeah.
He's got to back out of that. Lawson.
He has, but I think he's under a lot of self-inflicted pressure at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I agreed.
And he's already been dropped once. Red Bull won't hesitate in dropping him again.
I know. We said after the Saudi race that it was nice to see him, a good couple of overtakes and stuff.
Yeah,
it was nice to see his confidence potentially coming back up. Shame for him. Okay, so just a quick run through of how the sprint ended then. As we said, it ended under the safety car. First place was Lando Norris, 8 points for that. Second, Oscar Piastri, so McLaren won 2. Third was Lewis Hamilton, so fair play, well done to him for that. Fourth, Alex Albon, and Williams were brilliant all weekend, I thought.
Yes.
Fifth, George Russell, once again, Mr. Consistent. That's the top 5 he's finished in every race or sprint this season, so fair play to Russell. Sixth, Lance Stroll, again, more points for Aston Martin, scored by Stroll. Seventh was Liam Lawson, and eighth was Ollie Behrman. Now, Liam Lawson was
penalised.
Was penalised. He was dropped down. So after the penalties were applied, this is now the actual finishing result for the sprint. Norris, as I said, won. Piastri, Hamilton, Russell was promoted up to 4th because Albon was penalised. Stroll promoted up to 5th, so Noda then to 6th, Antonelli to 7th. So he did get a couple of points for the sprint, but obviously not as many as he could have got. And Pierre Gasly snuck into 8th place to get the last point. So that's the sprint. Stick around, and we will move on to both qualifying and the actual Miami Grand Prix.
The real race.
The real race that matters.